Hi, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. This is the Canadian Foreign Policy Hour. I am Yves Engler. Canadian Foreign Policy Hour is a critical discussion of Canada's role in the world. I'm coming to you from Jojage, which has long been a meeting place of various First Nations, otherwise known as Montreal. Hope everyone is doing well this evening. There is a very extreme example of foreign policy propaganda or omission that's been going on in recent days that I want to have a bit of a thorough discussion of at the end. So I'm going to jump right into sort of an update on some developments this week in Canadian foreign policy. On some developments this week in Canadian foreign policy. Sorry. And so, first of all, taking place in Calgary beginning today or yesterday is the World Petroleum Congress. It's the biggest, I guess, oil summit that takes place. All the big oil companies, private, state, come together. And according to Le Devoir, there's going to be 3 different ministers from Trudeau's government there. Global Affairs Canada sending 14 different representatives. The biggest delegation, as other ministries are also sending delegations. And of course, we all know that if we want to avoid further climate catastrophe, we need to be keeping this in the ground, fossil fuels in the ground. But clearly, the Trudeau government's okay with a big summit on petroleum. It was reported that Canada is on track to be the second largest developer of new oil and gas in the world. Actually, 10% of planned expansion globally. I think it's until, I forget the exact year, 2035, if I'm not mistaken. I put it on my Twitter. So clearly, we're just seeing, one of the highest per capita greenhouse gas emitting nations continues to expand. And obviously, there's lots of political support for that. Frédéric Boisron, who's a Haitian Canadian professor at one of the Quebec schools, he has an article titled "Le Canada adore son bandit légal 2.0." So Canada adores its legal bandit 2.0. It's playing off of Michel Martelly, what he called himself, and basically just about how much support Canada is giving to Ariel Henry. For those who read French, it's worth taking a look at that. On Friday, Haiti was supposed to be on the UN Security Council's agenda, and that was pushed off because of Chinese and Russian opposition, reportedly, which is interesting. So that means the UN mission to Haiti is again being postponed. I wanted to talk a little bit about anti-Haitian racism, which is a global phenomenon. It's particularly hideous in the Dominican Republic. And in recent days, we see some really outrageous developments on that front. The biggest public transportation union in Santo Domingo, the big main city in Dominican Republic, announced that no Haitian is allowed to get on a bus, public motorcycle, or taxi. Any Dominican driver who picks up a Haitian will be punished, according to the union president. I mean, this is just like outrageous racism. This, of course, is well rooted in Dominican history. And there's a big dispute. The Dominicans have been shutting the border down, which has big impact, short-term impact on Haiti's ability to eat, Haitians' ability to eat and get stuff. And this is rooted in in a whole horrendous history. Most notably, well, so the border shutdown is based upon Haitians apparently are diverting some of the water from a joint a river, and it's called Massacre River. And this is important historically because in 1937, the Trujillo dictatorship actually massacred something like 20, somewhere, I think the estimates are 17 to 35,000 Haitians were killed in the region. And just a basic an outburst of like anti-Haitian, anti-Black violence. And we have to make it clear that the Canadian government has been coordinating with the Dominican government a whole bunch in recent weeks on Haiti, right, on helping Haiti. And yet we have this like really extreme anti-Haitian government in the Dominican. On a personal level, when I went to Haiti in 2004, myself and Aaron Mate, we flew to Santo Domingo, and then we took a bus to Haiti, to Port-au-Prince. And on our return, we were basically hitchhiked. Just we actually sort of getting help from this clearly upper class white Dominican family, and how like quickly, they're very nice to us, but how quickly they referred to Haiti as the dark place and they're the light place. How quickly like really hyper racial undertone kind of racist undertone thinking came out was pretty remarkable. So it's a really serious issue in the Dominican, and Canada's again coordinating with the Dominican government that's pursuing these very anti-Haitian measures right now. The Globe and Mail published a front page piece, Jeffrey York, I think maybe on Tuesday last week, titled "Ottawa Greenlit Institute's Funds Despite Memo on Child Soldiers." So the Trudeau government provided $19 million to the Dallaire Institute for its operations, even though the Dallaire Institute works with its main bases in Rwanda, and it's been working with the Rwandan military. It's the Dallaire Institute supposed to be campaigning against child soldiers. And it's been working with the Rwandan military that's using child soldiers, as the UN's documented, in Eastern Congo, in their war in Eastern Congo. And so what was interesting about this story, clearly some faction of Global Affairs Canada went to Jeffrey York, who's the Globe Africa correspondent in South Africa, who's written quite a bit of stuff that's quite critical of Paul Kagame. And they basically told them that there's a division that Harjit Sajjan, the development minister at the time, when he went to Kigali, he really went like with this very pro-Kagame kind of thing, and that Global Affairs pushed them against doing this. And Global Affairs, the bureaucracy wanted less money to be given to the Dallaire Institute, but it's not clear exactly who, but Sajjan or someone in Sajjan's office wanted to give more, which is what they did. And so the Globe piece says, quote, "Some diplomats in Global Affairs have been perplexed by the federal government's strong support for the Kagame government, which contradicts Canada's human rights principles." Leaving aside the human rights principles, it's, Kagame is so brutal and so violent, and that even elements of Global Affairs are uncomfortable with the Trudeau government's, deepening love affair with Kagame. So obviously there's going to be more developments on that front, but it remains a really important issue because alongside Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a couple months before, Rwanda launched another of its many incursions into Congo, Eastern Congo, and rather than talk about international law, human rights, what we see is actually the Trudeau government doubling down in its support for Kagame while it pursues a violent occupation of Congo. So that contrast is I think, pretty stark one, and should be pointed out more often. The Globe today has a piece, changes to lobbying rules could spell end to 50 years of free trips to Israel for Canadian MPs, senators. And the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs is complaining that the Integrity Commissioner, I'm not sure if that's the proper title, but has brought in new rules, basically restricting lobby organizations from providing travel abroad. And I think they say they've brought 800 Canadian MPs and senators to Israel since 1975 or something like that. And it looks like that's going to be made not possible, and they're not happy about it. Obviously, this is a very good thing, and we'll see where that goes if they're able to pressure the commission to change that. I was sent a link to B'nai B'rith saying that they were able to get the Manitoba NDP to say that they endorse the anti-Palestinian International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism. I don't know if that's B'nai B'rith lying, but they're announcing on their website that Manitoba NDP has agreed to that, which I think should concern us. The NDP has, for the most part, rejected the IHRA anti-Palestinian definition. The National Post had a full page advertisement on a couple days ago, and about this big conference taking place in Ottawa, titled "Anti-Semitism: Face It, Fight It." And this is really a big apartheid lobby gathering that's going to be, they're lobbying for Jewish supremacy in Israel. They're framing that as a campaign against hate, and we'll see where things go. If there's actually any concerted pushback, there should be. I'm skeptical. A lot of the anti-racist world that would be into shutting down a big racist get together like this is not on board for challenging the apartheid lobby, but it certainly deserves to be challenged. The Jewish National Fund, which is an explicitly racist organization, is one of the sponsors. There's a couple. I went through the speakers. A couple of these prominent Twitter people. This one, Hen Mazig, who I see a lot in my Twitter. Just a couple of days ago, he tweeted out about how the Palestine Rights Festival at I think the University of Pennsylvania needs to be shut down because again, it's anti-Semitic. This is somebody who, any push for Palestinian liberation to their eyes is anti-Jewish. And that's what this conference is about. Is this, there's a push with the IHRA definition. There's a push with their special envoy to deflect criticism of Israel, Aaron Kotler. There's a push on all these different fronts, and now this big gathering is bringing all these forces together. More to be seen. On Iran, the Minister Melanie Joly tweeted out, I think it was on Friday, tomorrow marks 1 year since Mahsa Amini's death, and Canada has been relentless in sanctioning members of the Iranian regime and its perpetrators. Today, we've announced an additional 6 individuals to that list. And so they're just boasting about their sanctions. It's like 14 rounds of sanctions. They don't ever talk about whether how this aligns with international law. There's a question mark in my mind, and I understand that many believe that there was that unilateral sanctions contravene international law. The Group of 77 met in Havana last couple of days, and they actually put out a statement condemning unilateral sanctions. In the Globe today, there's a column titled "We Should Honor Mahsa Amini's Memory by Sanctioning Her Killers," and it's the authors that I find kind of interesting. Bill Browder, from Russia, the guy who pushed the Magnitsky Act, There's one of the people is from the Kotler's Raoul Wallenberg Center. And, this is, I don't doubt, I mean, I think Iran is a repressive government. It's obviously misogynistic. Forcing women to wear a veil. This is not policy that I'm supportive of or share, and I certainly think Iranians have every right to certainly call for getting rid of forced veiling in public, and for that matter getting rid of the regime. But what I don't agree with is the Canadian government's intervention in this, the increasing sanctions, the effort to oust the government. And if you contrast it with their policy, the other governments in the region that are as or equally repressive or patriarchal, often more so, you find that they take a very different policy to those governments. So the question of Iran is still at play. The Globe has a piece titled "Canada Must Better Protect Immigrants from Foreign Threats." And it's basically saying that it's focused on China, of course, that the immigrants to Canada from different regions or different, Tibetans or Uyghurs or and or other Chinese are facing threats, and the Canadian government needs to start, taking action on this front. I think this is obviously very hyped. The threat question, actually, we just saw it today. Apparently, the intelligence services Canada saying that the Indian government was involved in the assassination there of a Sikh. I don't know if it's what the word I think a Sikh minister or the appropriate term. In Vancouver there, I guess a few months ago. And there is some denunciation of that, but if it was the Chinese government that was accused of the assassination, it would be a far bigger brouhaha. What I found interesting about this report is partly the authors. So two of the three authors of this, it's called "Combating Transnational Repression and Foreign Interference in Canada." And Sarah Tyke, David Matas, and Hannah Taylor. Well, David Matas, of course, is B'nai B'rith, long-standing B'nai B'rith lawyer. Sarah Tyke is a Israeli Canadian, and she's been involved in all this pro-Israel campaigning, and the whole idea of Israel lobby players playing their role in this sort of like foreign interference question and Chinese foreign interference in Canada. It's too hypocritical. It's just so obvious, kind of double standard, and it's never pointed out. And on the note of the foreign interference and the bad China angle, conservative foreign critic Michael Chong testified to the U.S. Congress on Tuesday or Wednesday, and the reports in the Globe, the front page report in the Globe, the article is titled "MP Chong calls for united action on Chinese interference in testimony before U.S. lawmakers." Well, in this article, and this is exactly what this is. We understand this is what this whole foreign interference business is all about. They quote some of the U.S. congressional officials, Congress people, and they're just like over the top, right? The one says, "You want to mess with us? Okay, we will mess with you, and maybe we can bring their leadership down." So this is about the Chinese leadership, right? This is American speak. The mess with us, we'll mess with you. Real sort of Yankee whatever. But this is, of course, what Chong's all about. This is all, the whole foreign interference is all about laying the groundwork for this. They are the aggressor, so we have the right to send naval vessels. We have the right to try to take out their leadership. this is this is what this is about, and we have on the front of the naval vessels, right? You've got the 3 Canadian naval vessels patrolling the region, and there's an article in Stars and Stripes, the U.S. military publication, talking about how the HMC Ottawa plans to remain in the region, taking part in all kinds of engagements, and it quotes the Canadian official, military official, as a sustained and consistent presence in the region, the Royal Canadian Navy is demonstrating Canada's commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. No, it's not. It's provoking. It's trying to increase tensions in the region. And the CBC's David Common, who I talked about last week, who was on HMCS Ottawa for this big armada of US and Canadian and Japanese vessels, and framed it as the Chinese being aggressive as Canadian vessels go through Taiwan Strait, get very close to Chinese territorial waters. He's done a whole series of these reports from the Philippines, all about how basically China is trying to conquer the Philippines, the Spratly Islands or Spratly Islands, one from Japan, and all this like great thing about how Japan is increasing its military spending, and you know, this is Japan ending one of the good things that came out of World War II. A few good things out of World War II was the pacifist constitution, was, you know, a relatively non-militarized Japan, and this is what their CBC is like celebrating, right? Whole series of these over the top reports. The bad China, we have to have more Canadian military in the region. And this is where our public broadcaster is at on the issue of China. The new so-called defense minister, Bill Blair, announced yesterday 33 million in Canadian financial support for a British-led partnership for air defense equipment to Ukraine. A little bit interesting. This is the first arms announcement that I understand since April 11th. They seem to have slowed down in their arms announcements, which I find a little bit interesting. I don't know if that suggests that the government realizes there's waning support. But anyways, this was a you know, not a massive one, but a significant announcement. I guess he's in Britain right now, meeting with the Canadian troops training Ukrainian forces in the UK. The Incas, I think it's North York-based arms company, announced that it's establishing its newest production facility in Kyiv to produce everything from APCs to cutting-edge drones and different software solutions. So that's interesting. I'm not sure. I would presume that Russia's trying to blow up military facilities. We'll see when this gets off the ground, and if the Russian military tries to hit their facilities. Now, with regards to Ukraine, it's just all kinds of horrible stories coming out about just how much death the Ukrainian military has been facing. There's one report that professor, University of Ottawa Professor Ivan Kachinotsky reported on, that the person overseeing the mobilization in Poltava reported that 80 to 90% of those who were mobilized were killed, wounded, or incapacitated. And apparently, he didn't say this in any sort of negative way, but it was actually a call for why we need more mobilization. So there's all these stories coming out of just the level of death that Ukrainian forces are facing in this counteroffensive. It's just absolutely grim stuff. Zelensky, in an interview with, I think it was The Economist, seems to sort of suggest that Ukrainians in European countries are going to be a threat if there's any holding back on military aid to Ukraine, if there's sort of like an abandonment of Ukraine. That's a interesting angle. I wanted to mention quickly, just make a quick mention on two different Canadian professors who've been associated with the Rideau Institute and ceasefire.ca, sort of the left establishment foreign policy world. Michael Byers, he ran for the NDP. He's he's viewed as a critic of the war, Canada's war in Afghanistan. He had a piece on Monday, I think it was, titled "Elon Musk's Moves in Ukraine Show He's No Master of Geopolitics." And it's all fine. Elon Musk, lots of opinions I don't like. He's obviously richest person in the world. Lots of good reasons, or was richest person in the world. Lots of good reasons to dislike him. But Byers is basically criticizing him for not giving more of his Starlink and the whole business about the Ukraine, not calling him up for the satellite use to bomb Crimea early in the war. And Musk's given all kinds of free use of the Starlink to the Ukrainian military, which has apparently been incredibly important for the Ukrainians, because the Russians, I think, initially were able to knock down most of their satellites or most of their communication capacities. But Musk was uncomfortable about going this next step and potentially leading to, as he put it, World War III. And here you have Michael Byers attacking him in the Globe and Mail. And Michael Byers has published a whole series of these like over-the-top hawkish pieces in the Globe on Ukraine. And again, this is somebody who was like the go-to, like the Canadian Council of Canadians, right? Was working with Michael Byers on foreign policy issues. And another person in today's Globe, Walter Dorn, prof at the Royal Military College Canada. He's like the biggest proponent of peacekeeping in Canada. He's got a piece titled, Canada is letting other nations do the heavy lifting on peacekeeping. And this piece is just like more peacekeeping. And what he defines as peacekeeping, he starts off with the Medic Pocket 30th anniversary of that mission, and which was a very violent affair, and or battles, should I say? And he basically is just like, we need more peacekeeping. In the piece, in the article, he says, Canada still seeks to build a rules-based international order, but it must do much more to support the center of that order, the United Nations. So he's taking up all the rhetoric of the Trudeau government of international rules-based order. And again, Walter Dorn was somebody who was totally tied in with the Rideau Institute, totally tied in with that milieu of like supposed left criticism of Canadian foreign policy. And he's really just an advocate for a certain type of Canadian military deployment. He wants it under the UN banner, whether that, overthrew the government in Haiti in 2004 or killed Patrice Lumumba in the Congo. It doesn't matter. He wants more UN. And I've written about him in my, both Byers and Dorn in my book, Left, Right, Marching to the Beat of Imperial Canada. So a couple days ago, Trudeau tweeted out, today we thank Canada's military families for the sacrifices they make and for the support they provide. To the partners, parents, children, and siblings of our Canadian Forces members, you are the strength beside the uniform, and we'll continue to be here for you too. The unsung heroes of our nation was one, and this was Canadian Military Families Day. And this is I think it's the first time this came across my radar. And apparently, so it's the third Friday of every September. And it began in 2019. They got the House of Commons to pass some unanimous resolution supporting this. And it comes from the Together We Stand Foundation. And it's a handful of wealthy Canadians who seem to have initiated this initiative. And then they got like celebrity board with like Wayne Gretzky and Stephen Harper and Paul Martin. And it's just one more example of this sort of celebration of the Canadian military, celebrating the military families. Now, of course, military families, when people go away for a long time, that of course has impact, but there's many different jobs where people leave town for long periods of time. And it's really, I find it quite fascinating how, the wealthy back these types of initiatives. I detail this in this Stand on Guard for Whom book, People's History of Canadian Military, how many different ways in which wealthy Canadians have instigated or spurred these different initiatives that promote the military. And that's, of course, because the military aligns with a hierarchical structure. The military aligns, of course, with imperialism, and the military is not a threat, or very, very rarely is the military a threat to wealth holders, outsized political and economic interests. Murray Brewster, the military reporter for CBC, has a piece a few days ago titled "Canada Needs to Ditch the Complacency and Get Serious About National Security, Experts Say." And it's based upon a Business Council of Canada report that the CBC article says the most recent wake-up call. Was anyone listening? And in this Business Council of Canada report says that calls for to reinvigorate Canada's ties with international partners like NATO, NORAD, G7, and Five Eyes. So all the most militaristic, imperialistic, white supremacist elements of Canadian foreign policy. It calls to hit the 2% of GDP. Military spending is the floor, not the ceiling. And it just basically calls for more militarism. Now, Brewster frames this as like some sort of new thing. But the Canadian Business Council and its antecedents, as I point out in my book, have repeatedly put out reports calling for more military spending. They represent arms companies, among others, and they represent a corporate class that's very close to the military. Maybe even more importantly. But again, this is all how Brewster knows this, of course. This is just his militarist propaganda seeping through. Now, on the note of militarist propaganda, a week ago, a big Storm Daniel, which had hit Greece, caused all kinds of problems, much of the Mediterranean, it hit eastern Libya. And it led to stunning levels of devastation. And there seems to be, obviously, climate crisis is exacerbating weather disturbances. The more arid nature of the terrain has made it less able to absorb water, according to one report I saw. But there are two more clear political developments in Libya that contributed to the scope of the disaster. One is it seems that there was very poor evacuation. There's contradictory messages coming out about whether people in Derna should evacuate, which is tied to the political instability in the country, the political division in the country. And the other thing is the two dams collapsed. Now, these dams were known to have been problematic, needed upgrades. There was repairs being done in 2011 that were disrupted by the war, uprising and war, and there's been like regular reports and calls for repairs of these dams since that time. Apparently, even like a couple of days ago, or a couple of days before they broke, there was calls for repairs. There's this report, horrible story in the New York Times about this guy about a year ago. He does this report which basically predicted more or less what happened, and a big chunk of his family was killed in the flooding. Very, very kind of a sad and tragic story. So the level of human death was definitely tied to the instability in Libya, both at the poor evacuation and poor repair question on these dams, which is tied to the instability. Now, the media in this country has reported on some of this context that the instability and the violence in Libya are creating it. The media has been able to omit the Canadian, the NATO war in 2011 and Canada's role in that. In some cases, in absolutely remarkable ways. The CBC, Andrew Chang from the CBC, who he's on the National fairly regularly, comes across on a bunch of domestic issues, comes across as a sort of liberal, social democratic-y kind of reporter or news anchor, and he does this 10.5-minute report. I forgot to write the title down, but it's got like war, Libya's predilection for war, help the catastrophe. It's an entirely context-based report. And he simply omits NATO's 2011 war. So here you have the Canadian public broadcaster for a Canadian audience omitting the most politically salient issue, namely the NATO bombing, thousands of bombs over 6 months, led by a Canadian general with Canadian, I think 7 Canadian fighter jets, 2 Canadian naval vessels, Canadian special forces on the ground. You have those special forces violating the UN Security Council Resolution 1970, 1973. Also, you had Garter World special forces admitting that they were on the ground, even though the UN resolutions explicit, Montreal-based private security company, admitted explicitly, the UN resolution explicitly no private military companies, because that was supposed to be Gaddafi that was relying on private military companies. You have John Baird, his first visit as a foreign minister, to go to Benghazi to meet with the rebels. He writes on one of the bombs at the Canadian base in Italy, as some of the freedom, democracy, and one of the bombs that they were about to drop on Canadian fighter jets about to drop on Libya. He says at the time that there could be no government worse than Gaddafi's government. This was Canada seizes all the assets of the Libyan state and gives Canadian company, Ottawa company, provides drones to the opposition with the assets that Canada seized from the Libyan government. The Canadian military naval vessels, they blow up some Gaddafi Libyan government vessels, and then there's big shipments of weapons coming in. They let it pass through to the opposition forces, and this is all reported on in the Ottawa Citizen, in the corporate press, right? The Canadian military knew that this was an intervention would lead to instability. They talked about, internal documents talked about, the opposition in Benghazi were jihadist forces. The Canadian aircraft pilots joked that they were Al Qaeda's air force in the bombing of Libya. So all the 12 years of instability, right? The political division, the violence, right? I think there's still thousands of militias. There's 2 official governments in Libya and thousands of different militias. This flows from the NATO war that they can't even mention. Right? You can't even mention Jeffrey York, front page piece in the Globe and Mail. Jeffrey York's like one of the best. I mean, there's not many of them left, but he's maybe the best corporate, foreign correspondent. Right? He's the guy who's did good stuff on Rwanda and Paul Kagame. Jeffrey York has a big piece, front page, 2-page spread of pictures in the Globe and Mail. Nothing. Just simply omits NATO. Now, Jeffrey York knows that the African Union was repeatedly condemning, calling for negotiations. They tried to send like a half dozen African leaders, try to go to Libya early on, and NATO blocks them, right? So the level of omission by the Canadian media on NATO war is absolutely stunning. I mean, Harper organized a big celebration afterwards, spent like almost $1 million, huge celebration of our great achievement in Libya. Bob Rae, then the Liberal leader, Nicole Turmel, the then NDP interim leader, they celebrated this great thing we did in Libya. This is all the responsibility to protect that Canada was doing. Now look at the catastrophe that's come out of it. Heather McPherson from the NDP tweeted about Libya, and she blocked comments. Right? Why did she block comments? Well, because she knows that the NDP supported 2 House of Commons resolutions backing the war in Libya. They put out that horrendous statement after Gaddafi was brutally assassinated. Bob Ray on the CBC, who was celebrating Libya destruction, he's on CBC, quotes him saying, Bob Ray says countries must work together to shore up infrastructure as there's more disasters. I mean, this is partly flowing out of Libya stuff. Now, Dimitri Lascaris points out something on Twitter I think is an important one that you won't see basically anyone contrasting do, which is that the Canadian government has now announced $5 million in aid to Libya. And so he points out, says, quote, Canada spent $347 million in 2011 to participate in NATO's destruction of Libya. Canada is spending a paltry $5 million in 2023 to aid Libyans in their moment of dire need. And then he goes on to say that's represents the international rules-based order. Now, historically, liberal commentators and aid groups would contrast military spending versus aid spending. That's a pretty common thing. You have aid groups that would talk about that. They won't in this case, because they can't even talk about the fact that it was this war that Canada was part of. The media won't even let that be mentioned, or barely ever be mentioned. It's absolutely remarkable. I think I'm going to leave it at that. If anyone has any comments or questions, I'm not sure if Laura is here. I'll make Laura a co-host, and go ahead, comments or questions if I don't see them.
Yeah, I'm Jerry. Sorry. No, I don't see any hands up right now. No. Do you see any difference even like, so the CBC, which is an organ of the government really, and you have the others like, for example, CTV, or I don't know if they get funding from, I haven't lived in Canada for a long time, from the government. Do you see any difference in mainstream media? Are there any that aren't quite as bad?
I watch the National. I watch most nights. I watch CBC The National. I don't watch CTV News, so I don't really have a good comparison. I don't watch global news. I mean, I do read. I read. I actually don't have access to Toronto Star anymore, and the Toronto Star a little bit better. I used to read the Toronto Star daily, but the library shut that down. The National Post is more fanatic than the Globe and Mail. Maybe not on China. Le Devoir, like on something like China, Le Devoir has been turned into just as bad as I would say it was the best of the daily papers, and it's just as bad as the National Post, really. On the Libya stuff specifically, I mean, I did a couple. I haven't gone to all Canadian media, but I went through quite a few stories, and they basically all just refused to mention. Interestingly enough, the Associated Press story that the CBC they do mention it. They have like a sort of like a good way of mentioning the NATO war, like I would call a propagandistic way of mentioning the NATO war, really mentioning it but downplaying it and sort of obscuring it all. And I should have said I should have mentioned this point. I meant to say this in discussion of the media. Now, the reason I think that the media bias is so crazy on this Libya thing, like it's embarrassing. I mean, Andrew Chang at CBC knows NATO bombed Libya and went to war in Libya in 2011, right? This is comical level of omission, right? To me, it doesn't, like, from a standpoint of just benevolent Canada foreign policy mythology, you can put in that Canada was part of the NATO mission in Libya, and you can kind of frame it in a way, you know, obscure it, make it, you know, we're supporting bad Gaddafi, whatever. Why that level of propaganda and why that level of omission is actually in part tied to, you know, what's taking place in Ukraine. And it's this whole, like, you know, 2 years of drumbeats of NATO is a defensive alliance that played no role, its expansion played no role in whatever, in the unprovoked invasion that was unprovoked, and NATO is defensive, and it's unprovoked and NATO is defensive. Like, that's why they can't talk about NATO violence in Libya, is because it's actually the propaganda around Ukraine that's, you know, it pushes them in that direction. But to just, you know, conclude on the question, no, I mean, like, it's very slight differences. I feel like the differences are getting less and less.
Yeah.
You know, I think one of the things that's happened when you have fewer reporters covering this thing, it, you know, becomes even more of the wire services. One of the things I've said this a lot, and on the foreign policy issues, one media tactic is that, like, I've seen lots of instances of being able to break into the dominant media on foreign policy issues, but it's overwhelmingly through local angles, right? So on Haiti, we were able to break into the dominant media many times, but it was by organizing a local Montreal issue, you know, like usually Haitian community thing, that was targeting something, and then you get some critical reporting. So the reporter doing it, it's like they're not reporting on Haiti, they're reporting on something happening in Montreal, right? Whereas the reporters that are in charge of, you know, the foreign correspondents for Canadian Press, the military correspondent or military affairs person for CBC, those people are like the ones who are the most integrated into the propaganda networks, right? The local journalist just covering the local Montreal story that is willing to have on somebody say, you know, Canada helped overthrow the government in Haiti. What they're just doing is, you know, covering local news. So you know, that's an element of how the media works. But as there's fewer of these reporters around, you know, covering the different stuff, that's, I think, meant that the handful of people who are in the, you know, senior positions on these issues have, you know, they are even more important. Like that, you know, there's a couple of people at Canadian Press who you know, they're responsible for like 30% of all stories about Canadian foreign policy appearing in all the papers in the country, and like 2 people, right? And so yeah, it's pretty grim.
Okay, we have a bunch of hands up now. Laurel, you're next, please.
Yeah, I just was going to, when you said they're not allowed to talk about our participation, you know, in the NATO intervention, who exactly is stopping us from talking about it? Or is it a kind of a gentleman's agreement that you don't talk about it?
No one is stopping Jeffrey York or Andrew, is it Andrew Chang? Yeah, Andrew at CBC. No one is stopping them. They are stopping themselves. That's the fascinating,
Right.
They know that, like, you know, it's just not really, like, it's not polite to talk about NATO violence. Like, it's a defensive alliance, you know, it's not really, I almost guarantee you there were, you know, those individuals making that, like, imposing that upon themselves, and that those individuals completely recognize that NATO was involved in Libya, and that they completely recognize that NATO played some role in the post instability. I mean, you have to be the dumbest person in the world to not.
Right. So how do we go after them? How do we, I mean, there was no accountability for what they did. And so how do we go after them and make,
I mean, I wouldn't say no accountability on Twitter. That report from Chang and CBC, like hundreds of thousands of people saw the tweets that Justin Pudor put out, that Ben Norton put out. There's a couple other people that put the tweets up. So, you know, there's a little bit of accountability, and I'm pretty sure that Chang saw that, and certainly people at CBC saw it. I also pointed out in that piece that I just published on Canada Files that, you know, I looked at Canada Land, right? The media watchdog or media critic Canada Land, and Jesse Brown and I forget the 2 other names of those guys that are, like, you know, big Canada Land players, on their Twitter accounts. They say nothing about it. So not only is this a mission like a remarkable propaganda feat, the people who are supposed to be paying attention to the CBC specifically and Canadian media in general, sort of like, biases, they won't even report on it, right? Because this is like marginalizing them. But I don't know the way to accountable. I mean, I think I think Chang is based in Montreal. I actually looked to see if he's around. I live pretty close to CBC offices, and okay, try to find him like out on lunch break one day and just start asking, talking to him about this and like hold him accountable, in that way that you and I have done, Laurel, in different contexts. I don't know what you can do, but people have. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it comes back to if there's no organized force saying that NATO is a violent imperialistic alliance, then they're going to keep getting away with it, right? Like unless there's a mass of people making that point, and then often that will then trickles through the NDP structure, or trickles through the Green Party structure. But unless there's some organized peace movement, anti-war movement, anti-imperialist movement, whatever you call it, putting that out there, they're able to get away with this stuff.
Okay, Alan, you're up next. Alan?
Yes, hi. Just a comment that I'd like to make is that my view of where Canada sits in the world and its involvement in international politics is one of basically being very much an echo of American foreign policy. And I tend to look at Canada as being part of what I call Anglo-American Canadian group that really dictates to the rest of Western Europe as to what they're going to do. I mean, our involvement in Libya, in the murder of Patrice Lumumba, 1932, a Canadian intervention in El Salvador, the Lima Group, 1973 coup in Chile, all of these things kind of take it in that direction. And then to look at the NDP, I really believe that that there should be another party must step up to the plate to replace the NDP when they've got this kind of, bordering on so many ways when it comes to foreign policy, next thing to fascism or certainly imperialist.
Yeah.
I agree with the broad outline. I don't know that the party structure is the way to deal with this issue, but I certainly agree with all the broad. This is structural. There's a pattern here that we have to look at that pattern. We have to build movements that are challenge it, and how those movements develop, or like what forms. I think that's up for lots of different discussion.
Okay, Hans, you're up. Hans?
Yes, the self-censorship of journalists in the CBC and in the Globe and Mail is reinforced, let's not forget, by the fact that the boss of the CBC is a direct appointment from the PMO. And that is really the chain of command that intimidates journalists, because that would be, a black mark in your career if you severely displease the governing party. Permit me to try to change the topic a little bit. I was at the anti-war demonstration in Toronto, the climate change demonstration. I'm getting ahead of myself. At Queen's Park in Toronto. And I must say that there was a bit of a subdued atmosphere. The turnout was not quite as expected. But listening to Amy Goodman this morning with her coverage of the New York turnout of 75,000 people, that was a much more lively and aggressive crowd. Eve, could you comment on that?
Well, I mean, I saw there was big protests in New York City. I don't know much more than that. There actually wasn't here in Montreal. I was kind of surprised that there wasn't mobilization. I was looking for one. There's actually a semaine pour la rage climatique, a week of a week of climate rage, set of protests coming up in the next couple of days here, the end of the month in Montreal. Yeah, I mean, I think on the climate issue, you would think there should be a lot more people on the street. I think people are really there's a lot of dejection. I understand it was a pretty big demonstration in Vancouver. I saw some images. I don't know how big they were around the world, but yeah. So I don't have a whole lot more on that.
Okay, Norman?
Hey, I was just wondering if you found there to be a comparable lack of exploration by the Canadian media of NATO's bombing of Serbia. Because I would say that, like, I think Putin is a villain and that his excuses are pathetic, but I would say that of all of his excuses, NATO's bombing of Serbia comes closest to explaining his actions, and nobody ever talks about it in my experience. I don't watch much Canadian media, so I'm asking from,
Yeah, I wasn't I was following Libya very closely in 2011. I wrote like a whole section in the Harper book, and then I wrote some other, wrote many articles at the time, and then in my Canada and Africa book, looked at it from different angles. So I followed the Libya stuff very closely. I didn't in 1999. I was not politically engaged in the same way. So I don't know, like, my assumption is that it was like the same kind of thing. It was total support. I know that even Sven Robinson, right, who's like the best foreign affairs critic probably the NDP has ever had, at the far left of the NDP, he backed the NATO bombing of Serbia until like halfway through it, right? At some point he shifts gears, but he kind of like sort of apologizes for what he had done previously, but even he was backing it, which speaks to the political climate. So yeah, I mean, and that I think that is, from a Russian perspective, that was that's obviously much closer than Libya, and is more sort of threatening. But yeah, my like, I've, to the extent I haven't done it like a media analysis on the NATO bombing Yugoslavia, but my understanding from reading sort of secondary sources and stuff is it was pretty extreme propaganda, and it's still like framed in a kind of like humanistic way, though it gets much less attention today.
Ifo, can you please unmute? Okay, great.
Yeah, sure. I had someone talking in the background, so I was waiting until it became clear. Thank you for your insightful analysis as always. I was wondering if you think there's any chance of or any hope of changing the narrative in Canada, or about Canada's involvement both in Haiti and also with Libya, because it seems like stuff comes out at the time that it happens, and then it's sort of magically, it's like it never happened, right? And they're like acting surprised at what happened in Libya. So I was just wondering what your thoughts are in the chance of reforming that or changing that in the Canadian landscape.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is always a chance. These are really, they're uphill battles. We have to be very clear with that. I think on Haiti, we have seen some very modest successes, right? Like I said this on a session about maybe a month ago. There was a piece written by I forget the name of the group, but a very establishment Black organization here in Montreal, and she had a piece in La Presse where she talked about the Ottawa Initiative on Haiti, and I can tell you that this was something that we've been campaigning about for 20 years. Someone like Jacques Haïti, Jean Saint-Vive, has probably raised the Ottawa Initiative on Haiti, I don't know, maybe wouldn't surprise me 1,000 times on Facebook or Twitter or public discussions, whatever. We've been pumping this out, and just in the last couple of years, they're actually, Radio Canada did do a report that looked at the Ottawa Initiative on Haiti on the 10th anniversary of the earthquake. this woman writing in La Presse, who is, no anti-imperialist, she, felt the need to raise, the paragraph only, but raise so there's like, clearly it's seeped into, certainly in the Haitian community in Montreal, it's seeped into, certain layers of political life where there's sort of a recognition that Canada has done some like bad things in Haiti. I don't think that, if you go to like Kelowna and you ask average person in Kelowna about Canada's role in Haiti, they of course they know nothing or whatever. But among like sort of a little bit internationally minded, liberal, intellectualish kind of world of like Montreal, there has been some gain, some victory in consciousness raising that Canada has been aligned with the US on, it's contradictory. Simultaneously, they would also often have, very kind of like, paternalistic and benevolent Canada kind of thinking. But so there's, this sort of contradictory stuff within there, but that didn't come, that came because people were campaigning on this, right, for literally decades, right? And so it's a very small victory, but it's certainly better than not having that consciousness that seep into the consciousness.
Thank you very much. And you just reminded me of someone who I don't know how I managed to forget. I think there was a couple of members of the Haitian community who came down to PEI about 15, 20 years ago. They actually stayed at my house while they were doing a tour, talking about what was really going on in Haiti. So I'd love to connect with you and see offline to see if I could reconnect with them, because it's been a while. But thank you.
Okay, so Eve, Laurel and Chris, your hands, I don't know if you have another question or if you just didn't take your hand down. Laurel, I'll unmute you. Or can you unmute? Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Chris.
Oh,
Yeah.
Chris?
Yeah, I'm a teacher and in middle school, and we're talking about like getting this information out. And I'm wondering if you have ideas about how to get that information out in a way that teachers can help keep the students up to date and keep them up to, understanding. And like one of the things that happens as teachers is like I try to participate in your meetings and listen to them every week and try to keep on top of it. But I don't know that there's too many across the entire country who do. And then like I've bought a couple of books, but it takes a lot of effort to basically do what you do, I think. And then trying to, like package that in a way that can be disseminated on a grand scale, across the country or what have you. So I'm wondering if you have ideas about that, or if you have like ways of just kind of, I think you understand what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, Pitasana has the 6-part series. I don't know if you've seen that documentary series about Canadian foreign policy. Someone in the chat must know. I'm totally blanking on the title of the series, but it's a overview. It's very good politically. He doesn't have a Hollywood budget behind him or anything like that. So it's not like top-notch documentary kind of whatever, but it's it's good. It's not amateur either. So that's a kind of like a, 6-part series is a little bit more, takes a certain commitment. I think probably is like 6 hours of film, but probably people could watch or younger
What's
students.
the name again? Sorry.
What's truth to the power? Yeah. So someone in the chat's putting
Truth to the power. Is it truth to the power? Truth to the powerless? No, truth to the powerful? No. I'm sorry. Actually.
Yeah, so somebody will put it in the proper thing in the chat, I think.
Okay.
But yeah, so
because we as teachers, we sometimes do get like some social studies news, and that's for current events. But it definitely has that sort of like Canada can do no wrong kind of projection to it. And like there's a bit of a turn on residential schools, like teachers are teaching about that and we're understanding that. But it's not, it's like, we're not doing anything wrong now. That's all historical.
Mm-hmm.
So keeping up to date and that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a first step in all of this is puncturing the benevolent Canada foreign policy mythology. If you start from the assumption that Canada is just like, a force for good in the world and is always trying to help the children, bring democracy, if you start from that premise, you're going to go all wrong in understanding Canadian foreign policy. So films, books, articles that puncture that framing are essential. Now, you also need to keep up to date with all the different developments as well, which is very difficult. But the first step has to be bringing some doubt about the basic assumptions of Canadian foreign policy.
Okay, Elizabeth?
Yes, good afternoon. I'm very interested in this discussion, but one of the things, and particularly regarding what the educator just said, the teacher, is I think there should be much more a connection made between the militarization of our country, the increased militarization of Western Europe too, and climate change. I mean, there is nothing more damaging to the climate than war. It's damaging to human beings, but it's very, very damaging to the climate. The amount of machinery that's used, the airplanes, even the construction of all these war weapons, and yet somehow these two are kept in different silos, separate. And nobody talks about it. You don't get, I haven't heard any people in the climate change movement really talking about what war does and what militarization does, and how that money that is used to do the militarization is in fact could be used in a much more better way for everybody if it were used to counteract climate change. I wonder what you would like to say about that, and how we can bring those two issues together much closer.
I mean, I obviously agree, Elizabeth. It was called Greenpeace. It was called Greenpeace, right? It's not like this is that was the beginnings of Greenpeace, right? Is the nuclear submarines but with time the sort of anti-militarist element has been completely pushed aside, and quite frankly the last 19 months or whatever, that's gone even further, and you have the guy from 350, Bill McKibben, going on Democracy Now! And just like all NATO proxy warring, right? Like Bill McKibben has a whole section in his book about the Pentagon and how great the Pentagon is from a climate perspective. It's just total madness. But militarism is a powerful thing. It is a powerful thing. The nationalism, the imperialism that's intertwined with it, the straight dollars of the Canadian military is the biggest PR, institution in the country. It's got the most people doing PR of any institution by a long shot. So it's definitely has to be part of our struggle. And I know there's people on this call who, Hans and others were, trying to bring that message to the recent climate mobilizations. But it is also it's a struggle.
Yeah, people were saying even the thing that Tamara Lorenz is very active on climate and war, and also the group Code Pink in the US, the peace group, they have a very active contingent exactly on that issue of climate and war. I think that's all the questions, Eve.
Oh,
okay. Thanks.
Oh.
Thanks. Oh,
could I was going to ask a question.
I'm sorry, I don't see you anywhere.
Well, I was here.
I saw you earlier and then you disappeared, or did you take your...
I didn't know.
Oh, well, I don't see your hand up. Go ahead, Joan.
Okay, so I was very much involved in trying to stop the invasion of Yugoslavia or Kosovo, and I was at the International Court of Justice when Yugoslavia, excuse me, took the NATO countries. And all the NATO countries stood up there in front of the International Court of Justice. And this is relevant too, related to what Canada is doing now, trying to not get the International Court of Justice involved. And they said they would not respect the jurisdiction of the International Court of Justice. So I wrote to CBC about this because I was there as a member of the media. And they just ignored it completely. And they took a stringer, the comments by a stringer from New York to put in their article. And they never dealt with, they didn't want to deal. And so I got a media pass because I was going to go and challenge Jamie Shea, who is the head of the media for the NATO embalming of Yugoslavia. So I went to the meeting and I sat in the front row and had my hand up first, but he ignored me completely and went to someone else. So on the way back, I grabbed the microphone and said, is this what's going to happen? I said what happened in the International Court of Justice. And I said, is this what's going to happen when NATO is going to be taken to the ICC? And there was dead silence in the room. And he said, oh, well, we really, really support the ICC and the IJ. You know, he went on and on about this, but you can't ask a second question. So no one, there was full of media, international media, but no one continued to say any more about, they didn't say anything about it or follow up at all. They could easily have followed up. And then I was told that when I was on the bus with the media, they said, you're never going to be able to come here again. And I said, well, why are they speaking? Why isn't the media speaking out? And they said, well, it's because they will lose their status. They won't be able to attend these meetings. And I just wanted to, one last thing, I just wanted to mention that in 1997, I went to a climate change meeting in New York. And I was with the Canadian Voice of Women, and we came up with a declaration saying that we called it the elephant in the room, militarism. So we were tying in the two at that time in 1997. But then I went up to the chair. I'll just tell you this briefly. I went up to the chair of the meeting with the declaration. I read it out at the UN and went up with it, and they refused to accept it. And so then I ended up giving it to the head of the IPCC. But they just didn't want to talk about NATO. It's just amazing. Media will not. It's just so true what you've been saying. Thank you.
Just to conclude quickly, I forgot to mention this, but there's also the upcoming webinar and the week of actions later in the month that people should check out by the Canadian-wide Peace and Justice Network. The webinar on the 20th, and then I think the week of action begins on the 30th. But that's one way to rebuild the anti-war movement and push the anti-NATO perspective. But I should go, and thanks everyone. Same place, same time next week. Take care.
Thanks, Eve.